Hey, Midwest Picker here. Welcome to episode 2 of Midwest Picker Stories. This one, I might lose a few subscribers because it's really gross. I don't know who I'm kidding. I'm probably going to lose subscribers for every story that I share. But hey, that's the risk you got to take. So these are my personal stories that are 100% true, not embellished. I was either there or they happened to me. If you want to know more details specifically, look down below the video in the description where I explain it a little bit more detail. These stories aren't incredibly bizarre, newsworthy. They're not alien abduction or Bigfoot videos. They're not earth-shattering, but they are true, and I think they're interesting, funny, gross, and I think you'll enjoy them. And they do paint a picture of what life was like in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Life was different back then. No Homeland Security. Law enforcement was different. So these stories are for educational, entertainment purposes only. Do not attempt anything I share yourself. Do not try this at home. Any names I use in this video have been completely changed to protect people's privacy. So let's get into the first story, The Thing. So back in 1999, I'm an RN, and back then I was a nurse in a nursing home. I was considered what's called a charge nurse in West Michigan. My primary duties were passing medications, performing treatments, documentation, taking orders from physicians, supervising other staff like nurse aides. Here's a picture of me and Mrs. Midwest, my wife. So I do protect her image like I do other people's images of real actual photos. This is how we met actually, was at work. I was a nurse and she was a nurse aide. Some other duties of a charge nurse in a nursing home are also to make assessments, like I said, documentation, but we also supervise and monitor the nurse aides, and sometimes we assess their work and we will shadow them and watch them perform vital signs or incontinent care, or they'll even assist us in doing dressing changes and help us like restrain people as needed, or hand us supplies if we're going to like flush a central line. We work very closely together. Some of the duties of a nurse aide, they're multifaceted, but a lot of them are personal care for the patients who can't care for themselves. Dressing, feeding, bathing, toileting, taking their vital signs, reading their mail to them, some simple tasks and some very complicated, difficult tasks, and everything in between. And there are some patients in the nursing home that can't do anything for themselves, and those are what we call total care. So my manager, we'll call her Cheryl, it's not her real name. She's also a nurse, and she had an office on the unit where I worked. And often I would just pop into her office and sit down and make small talk. We'd talk about current events. We'd talk about patients and staff, just kind of shoot the breeze informally. So one day Cheryl was working and she called my name and she waved me over and asked me to come into her office. So I locked my cart, I go down to her office, I pop in a chair, and I say, "What's new, Cheryl?" She didn't say anything, she just smiled and stared at me, and then turned around, picked something up off her desk, handed it to me, and just smiled and said, "Guess what this is?" What she handed me was a specimen container. Now normally a specimen container has like a urine sample or a stool sample, something like that, that you seal up, label, and ship off to the lab. This was a little bit different. So this specimen jar that she handed me had what appeared to be like a gray caterpillar in it. And it was, it was big. And I said, "What the heck is this?" And she wouldn't answer. I said, I don't know, a mouse with no legs? And she laughed and said, "Nope." I said, a mummy's finger? She said, "Nope, it's not a caterpillar. It's not a mummy's finger. It's not a dead mouse without legs. I have no idea. This thing is weird and it's huge. Probably about 4 inches long, bigger than my thumb." I gave up. I said to her, "I don't know. I have no idea. What is this thing in this specimen jar?" So she smiled and she kind of leaned towards the doorway and she looked down the hall, and there was an elderly woman in a wheelchair. We'll call her Mildred. And she said, "See Mildred down there?" And I looked and I said, "Yeah, I know Mildred." Now Mildred had suffered a massive stroke. She couldn't do anything other than move her right foot and kind of propel herself around the facility in the wheelchair. She couldn't speak. She couldn't move her hands. She was total care. So the nurse aides that took care of her had to do everything for Mildred, head to toe. Dressing, bathing, they put makeup on her and some earrings. She was a wonderful lady, and she would smile, but that's about all she could do. So my manager, Cheryl, she looked at me and smiled and said, I don't know if you know this, but every once in a while I'll do an audit of the CNA's or the nurse aides' work. So when they dress somebody, bathe somebody, do any kind of work, I'll go behind them with a clipboard and I'll check this list, like a skills list, and make sure they did everything correctly. She said when I examined Mildred after she was given a shower, I checked her body from head to toe, behind her ears, her hair, everything. And what you see in that jar that you are holding in your hand is a plug that I pulled out of her navel. She said apparently when people give her showers over the past several years, nobody's ever cleaned her navel or checked it. And this is an accumulation of navel lint and sweat and whatever else, and it created this giant plug. And when she examined her body after the shower, when she was doing her audit, she saw this gray circular thing, and she grabbed a hold of it and she pulled on it, and she pulled this giant plug out that must be years old. She said it took some effort, but she dug it out and it was solid. My eyes were bugging out of my head. I'm like, oh my gosh, you've got to be kidding me. Not only is that disgusting, but that is total neglect. For years, people have never cleaned her navel, her belly button, and that's just wrong. And that's not just gross, it's wrong. So after I got over the shock and horror of that news brief, I looked at the container and I looked at her smiling and I said, well, the obvious question is, why are you keeping it? Why did you put it in this jar, and why is it on your desk? Why didn't you just get rid of it? She told me gleefully that she kept it because she uses it as a learning tool. She will quiz new employees, nurse aides and nurses, and when a new person is hired, they have an orientation period, a training period, some onboarding, and part of that is to meet Cheryl in her office, and she sits them down and she hands them this jar and makes them play the guessing game. And I guess it is a great learning tool because it is so disgusting. I mean, it's right there in 3 dimensions right in front of you. You can tell somebody how not to neglect the patients and how you should perform a shower and clean somebody properly. But when you hand them that jar with that mouse in it, that really hits home. So a couple days later, I'm doing my job, passing my medications, using the med cart down the hallway. I'm about 50 feet, maybe longer, away from Cheryl's office. And one day I see this new employee. It's a nurse aide. She's being introduced to the staff. She's being shown where the charts are. And then I see Cheryl kind of call her into the office. It's noisy. I can't hear what they're saying, but I can see what's happening. And she always kept her door open. So I see this innocent new hire sit down in the chair where I had been sitting a few days ago, and she's nodding her head, and you can tell that the two are talking. And after a few minutes, Cheryl takes this specimen jar and hands it to this poor girl. And this is like her first day on the job. And I see the girl, look it over, and then I see her shaking her head. I assume Cheryl's asking her, can she tell what it is, or does she know what it is? And I'm looking at my medication book, and I'm pulling pills out of the drawer, and I'm continually kind of like spying on them, kind of watching them. Then I hear a shriek, and this girl screams, and I look, and she quickly puts that jar back on the desk, and she like recoiled in horror. So from that point on, we referred to it as the thing. Now, Cheryl has retired a long time ago. I don't know if she threw it away or if she passed it on to her replacement. That would have been pretty hilarious, but it was pretty old, so I'm guessing she threw it away. So that's the story, guys. Not newsworthy, just something that I experienced working in a nursing home. I have a lot of nursing home stories. I have about 34 total stories. This is episode number 2. So hit that like button if you liked it. And if you know anybody that likes medical stories, nursing home stories, funny stories, they have a strong stomach and they like gross stories, I got a lot more coming. So hit that share button down below. Share it with somebody that you think might like it. That's it, guys. Until next time, we'll see you.